Heather said so eloquently, to all the current and former teachers, to the fellow alumni, especially Jerry Halpern for representing the pre-43 Townsend Harris here today. You know, we used to say the old alumni. But that word is really starting to feel like a stone in my pocket, standing in a room with a lot of glass. And a very special thank you to my family members who are here today. As Mrs. Rubin was recalling, English 1 was a phenomenal class for many reasons. Partly because it was a pilot for what became the senior colloquium, the humanities colloquium at Townsend Harris. And so she was team teaching with Dr. Hahn. Fascinating material. Now, how I paid attention to any of that material with Christina and Marshall, my future wife, sitting across the room, I don't quite know. But it was a terrific class. Made an impact in more ways than one. But to my parents who were here, and my in-laws, my brother-in-law, and sister-in-law, and my two older sons, Miles and Isaac, who rearranged some exams to fly in with me from Russia today. Christina and our youngest son, Ellis, are in Moscow. It's a little too big a trip for everybody. First, I want to say big congratulations to Heather Nash, who was my editor on The Classic, my very first editor on any newspaper, anywhere. As in any industry, there are a lot of concerns in journalism about institutional sexism, and many of them are quite valid. But in my own case, I credit Heather for the fact that I've always expected to have strong women editors who are a whole lot smarter than I am. So thank you, Heather, for that. One of the best, very best pieces of advice given to aspiring foreign correspondents is that if you want to really understand a place, truly understand it, don't read the nonfiction, the history, apologies to Mr. Stessel and Mr. Moskowitz, don't read the political science, but read the literature. And in the company of poets, journalists feel quite small. We're usually the bearers of obvious truths, not the deeper, hidden ones. And this is especially true in a place like Russia, where poets are truly revered as national heroes. So congratulations, Heather, and thank you for being encouraging at a time when it mattered most. I'm going to venture an educated guess, a hypothesis, as Mrs. Appel and Ms. Garcia might say, and suggest that I've traveled the farthest, set a record today for traveling the farthest to be inducted to the Townsend Harris Hall of Fame. I have no doubt that Ted Peck, who couldn't be with us, will correct me if I'm wrong. I have a feeling that Leonard Polonsky came from London. That's as far as it's happened before. In any event, I claim this record not because Townsend Harris alums remain obsessed with numerical achievement long after they graduate, although this is undoubtedly the case, but simply to illustrate just how much this award means to me and how important it was to me and to my family to be here with you today. I know there's limited patience for speeches, and Craig warned me that I'm allotted 5 minutes before the student musicians strike up but forgive me if I steal just a few more minutes, 1 minute per 1,000 miles traveled. And I'll be there. When I visit journalism classes and school newspaper staffs, and of course the most fun is when I've had time to be back with the Classic, one of the points that I make is that real journalism is student journalism, and vice versa. Real journalism is not something that starts when you graduate from school, but in fact starts in school. And proving the point, the Classic just the other day had a huge citywide scoop about the New York City Education Department. The Education Department finally, in the 21st century, has just allowed health teachers to conduct in-class demonstrations on the use of condoms. This was reported first in the Classic. It turns out Jason Lalji, the reporter who wrote that, is here today. Stand up. The Wall Street Journal and the Associated Press were among the bigger, humbled news organizations to chase that story. So big kudos for the Classic. If you don't read it online, you should. By the way, on the health education point, if there are alumni here who happen to be in need of continuing education, Ms. Nixon, the alumni board, working on that. But there are also more routine ways that student journalism and real journalism, so to speak, are one and the same. Dr. Lardman will always be the most intimidating community leader that I've ever encountered. I say this with fresh evidence. On Friday, 2 days ago, I was in Kiev to interview the Ukrainian president, Petro Poroshenko. Essentially, it's the exact same journalistic exercise, but compared to going notebook in hand to the principal's office, piece of cake. And quite seriously, if every leader had Dr. Lardman's gravitas, his unwavering commitment to excellence and intellectual honesty, the world would be a far, far better place. One of the really great advantages of working in journalism is that you get to know community leaders, not just as these public figures sort of remotely on TV, but you get to talk and interact with them as human beings. And so what I'd like to do is just tell you about, quickly about 2 lessons that I learned from the school leaders whom I had the honor of covering. First, of course, is Dr. Lardman, and as you heard, it's now been repeated often, even today. We'd start every school year at Townsend Harris, reminding everyone, we don't demand excellence, we simply expect it. The power of high expectations is an amazing thing. Just ask my sons Miles and Isaac, who we brought to Moscow 4 years ago, simply expecting that like millions of immigrant kids who land in New York City speaking no English, they would land in Russia and quickly learn to speak and read in Russian. Sure enough, they've met our expectations. Miles last year helped me translate interviews at the Winter Olympics in Sochi. And speaking of poetry, Isaac, ahead of final exams last week, was walking around the house reciting Lermontov's epic poem, Borodino. Pushkin is already old hat. I say this not to boast as a father, although I'm very, very proud, but to point out that at a time when elite educational institutions are under attack, and when aren't they under attack? Our problem is not that expectations are too high for some of our city students, but that expectations are still far too low for all of the students, the best students and for everyone. Kids can really do amazing things. The other lesson I wanted to share comes from James Friedman, who was the president of Dartmouth College when I was a student there, and who I also interviewed in his office quite a number of times. One of Friedman's favorite mantras was brilliant in its simplicity. People matter, he said, and ideas matter. In that simple thought is the power of an institution like Townsend Harris High School. An institution that is itself built on the simple, powerful idea that in a free, democratic society, public education is the great equalizer of opportunity. We never know exactly when we're going to meet the people who will change our lives forever. But we do know that it's more likely than not to happen when we're younger than we're older, and that if we're in a classroom, the chances are exponentially higher still. And we never know exactly when the ideas will strike that will change us in the world forever. But in this case, too, we know that the odds are higher and rarely better than when we spend time in and around an academy learning. We also know that educators, like my parents who taught for their entire careers, and all of the current and former teachers here today, are the heroes who bring people and ideas together every day. Heather and I, of course, are just 2 of your students. There are so many, many more, doing so many amazing, impressive things. And in so many ways, it's really thanks to you. In the end, Townsend Harris, of course, will matter most to me, not for any single academic lesson learned, but as the place where I met my future wife, Christina Pan Marshall, who was kind enough to adapt her own aspirations as a lawyer so I could chase my dreams in Washington and in Moscow. And after that, Townsend Harris will matter most because it's where I met lifelong friends, including many people in this room, as well as people like my classmate Jin Pak, who isn't here today because he's serving in the United States Army in South Korea. Christina and Jin and all of you are the people who matter, especially to me. And this is why receiving this award from you today means so very much. I really can't thank you enough.